미션 실패. Let's go!
This tank is fairly balanced and is allowed to deal 1500 damage at the edge of the map. This tank is fairly balanced. This tank is fairly... This tank...
The good old FV215B183, or otherwise known as the Deathstar. What happened to this tank? What is the story behind this tank? And why is it the most toxic tank in the game? Let me talk about the most controversial tank in the game, the Deathstar. So let me take you guys all the way back. Back where we didn't have premium tanks in containers. Back where we didn't have any horrible balancing decisions. Back where we don't have reforge planned. I'm taking you guys all the way back to September 14th, 2015. A new patch was released. It was called Update 2.1. Yeah, very creative. Where they introduced a new British tank destroyer line that led up to the 183. When the 183 got introduced, it was really bad. This tank had the worst gun in the game. Don't get me wrong, it had the damage, but the gun handling was the worst. It had a 3.4 seconds of aiming time and 0.4 base dispersion. Combine that with the worst on movement dispersion at 0.4 and combine that with horrible camo values and no armor whatsoever. This tank was insanely bad, so eventually in update 2.4 they buffed the 183. It got a 0.4 seconds to the aiming time, which means it went from 3.4 seconds to 3 seconds. They also buffed the turret dispersion by a lot. They buffed it from 0.4 to 0.2. After that buff, the 183 was pretty good. It sacrificed everything to gain the damage, and now it can finally hit the shells that it fired. Keep in mind, this was with 310 AP pen that deals 930 damage and 220 hash pen that deals 1300 damage. Also, I should mention in update 5.0, Wargaming released the equipments into the game, which allows tanks such as 183 to be even more accurate. That doesn't mean that we didn't have equipments already. We had equipments when the game got launched, but it wasn't the same as today. We only had 3 slots that we had to buy so we can make tanks even stronger. I don't remember the cost of one slot, but I think it was around 600,000 credits or something along that line.
My new headphone broke, my old headphone broke, my keyboard broke, my controller broke, my screen broke, my computer broke, my phone broke, my interface broke, my wall is broke, my door is broke, your port.
I just had to mention just to clarify any confusion. After that buff, the community realized how toxic this tank was. Being able to deal 1300 damage at the edge of the map is stupid and very toxic. So in update 5.7, the 183 got a nerf. This time Wargaming didn't go easy on this tank. They nerfed a lot of stuff. Just keep in mind that I don't have the exact numbers for this patch since they didn't mention any numbers, but take my words for it that they nerfed this tank to the ground. First of all, they nerfed the traverse speed. It is a bad nerf, but let's be honest, you were just sitting in the back the whole game, so it wasn't a big nerf. But then, they took a sledgehammer and beat the ever-living shit out of the 183. They nerfed the camo value on the tank. Keep in mind this tank had still the worst camo for a tank destroyer. And yet, they still want this tank to be even more spotted than the rest. After that horrible scene that we just witnessed, they looked at the 183 one more time and realized the 183 was still breathing. So they finally put it down by nerfing its gun dispersion. Wow. I wish I had the stats for this patch, because holy, they completely killed this tank. This was all in one single patch. Alright, postscript blitzing around here. I found some statistics that were nerfed in update 5.7. First of all, the dispersion went from 0.389 to 0.407. That's a huge nerf. Chopping down an inaccurate gun's dispersion makes the tank unenjoyable since you will miss even more shots now. Second, this is the biggest nerf of all of them. It had 29% camo while stationary, 27% while moving, and 1% while shooting. This is without camo net equipped. To put it into some context, the mouse has 28% camo stationary, 24% camo while moving, and 5% while shooting. The mouse is a super heavy tank, and the 183 is a glass cannon. So every time you shot with the 183, you were instantly spotted. Every single time you tried to peek, you were instantly spotted. I don't know what the camo values were back in the day, but yeah, these were the only stats I could find for this patch. So, back to pre-script blitzing around. Yeah, after this patch, this tank was dead. This tank was so bad, there was no reason whatsoever to play the 183 anymore. And yet, this tank was still the most played tank in the game. Even with those horrible stats, this tank was played the most of
Look at him.
Oh God, oh shit.
Even with those horrible stats, this tank was played the most out of any tanks. People just love to deal high damage instantly, so that's why it was the most played tank in the game. After some small buffs here and there, the 183 was still the worst tier 10 of them all. As I said, there was no reason to play this tank since there were other tanks that are 100 times better than that 183. So when update 10.3 came along, you know, the update that changed the whole tier 10 tanks, the 183 got some changes to it. So, in update 10.3, Wargaming decided to rework the 183. They nerfed quite a lot of stuff and also buffed a lot of stuff. The nerfs were shell velocities. The AP went from 830 to 730 milliseconds. Hash went from 830 to 690 milliseconds, and the cheap hash went from 830 to 640 milliseconds. It isn't that bad, but still, you have to lead your shots a lot. They also nerfed the on-movement dispersion from 0.18 to 0.2. They nerfed the pen from the cheap hash. It went from 92mm to 80mm. The hash alpha damage got nerfed. It went from 1300 to what we have today at 1210. They also nerfed the armor a little bit. Not that it had any armor to begin with. And probably the biggest nerf of them all, they nerfed the reverse speed of that tank from 14 kilometers to 12. Those were the nerfs. Let's go over to the buffs. Wargaming buffed the ammo capacity of that tank from 15 to 21, which was pretty nice, since the tank had a very little amount of ammo that it could store. They also made this tank faster by increasing the top speed from 34 to 38 kilometers. They buffed the aiming time from 3 seconds to 2.6 seconds. They also buffed the AP average damage from 930 to 950 and the cheap hash from 1300 to 1390. Lastly, they buffed the upper plate on the tank by a little. So these were the changes that I got. I will put the post rework stats and the reworked stats side by side so you can see what changed. After that rework, the 183 was even stronger than before. The fact that your AP alpha was almost at 1000 damage means that you can just chunk the hit points out of your enemies. Also, you didn't have to take any risk on doing splash damage like on the hash, since you have a 300mm AP pen that you can go through tracks and space armor. By buffing the aiming time as well, you can reliably sit in the back and rip apart so much damage. It's crazy, but it didn't stop there. There was a huge patch that not only affected the whole meta, but affected derp guns as well. A patch that was so brutal, so uncalled for, that everyone disagreed with. A patch so outrageous that made the best tanks even better. That patch was 11.0, also known as Equipment 2.0. So what happened in Equipment 2.0? They reworked all of the consumables and equipments. The consumables for the 183 didn't mean too much since it had no special consumable apart from adrenaline. But what is huge is that the equipments got a huge rework. I'm not gonna name all of these changes, but I will point out the most important of them all. First of all, calibrated shells got a buff. The AP/APCR/E/HE went from 5%, 10%, 5% to 8%, 5%, 13% and 8%. Which means the 183, if you run it with calibrated shells, went from 300mm AP pen, 220mm hash pen and 80mm cheap hash pen to 324mm AP pen, 238mm of hash pen and 86mm of cheap hash pen. That means that the Deathstar has enough AP pen to cut through anything. Combine that with 238mm of hash pen, that is 1210 damage, the 183 is ridiculous. On top of that, the camo net got buffed. This buff affects each class differently in the game. From heavy tanks that get the least amount of bonus to tank destroyer that get the most amount of bonus when equipped. So when the 183 has camo equipped, it gets 49% camo while stationary, 37% camo while moving, and 2% camo while shooting. On top of that, if you stand still for 3 seconds, the bonus doubles, so you get 69% camo while stationary and 3% camo while shooting. To put it into a perspective, the Leopard 1 gets 49% camo while stationary, 43% camo while moving, and 10% camo while shooting. That's not far behind the Leopard 1, which has good camo for a medium tank. The biggest change of them all is that the refined gun got a huge buff. They gave it 5% bonus buff, so it went from 10% to 15%. That means the 183 went from having with refined from 0.47 to 0.346. That is a huge buff to the accuracy. With that buff, the 183 was even more toxic than before. You can now sit all the way back in Melanovka and hit shots that are 500 meters away from you reliably. Those reworks really put the 183 as an insane vehicle. Not only is it toxic as hell, but now it's very strong. I would even call it overpowered just because of its capabilities that it can do. To be fair, yeah, it can't carry games, but the damage with an accurate gun is stupid and shouldn't be in the game. I forgot to mention that it has all red camo now. It doesn't get insta-spotted every time you peek. With all of these things that I just mentioned, Wargaming still decided to rework the 183 in update 11.3. They nerfed the shell velocity of every shell. On top of that, they nerfed the aiming time from 2.6 seconds to 3.1 seconds. But for some reason, they buffed the dispersion from 0.407 to 0.398. That means when you have refined equipped, you get 0.339 instead of 0.346. And that's the 183 that we have today. With that obvious buff, the 183 is broken. I have never seen a tank deal 4k damage that easily. This tank has some troll moments, but when this tank works, it's devastating. I don't need to explain why the 183 is toxic as hell. I think that's self-explanatory. I know I mentioned it a lot in this video, but the fact that you can deal 1210 damage at the edge of the map is very stupid. I don't know how I would balance this tank other than removing it from the tech tree and put the Badger as a tech tree tank, or even put the alligator that World of Tanks Blitz Leicester has. I would remove it from the tech tree and make it into a collector's vehicle, but that wouldn't change anything since everyone is playing this tank. By the time I'm recording this tank is the most played tank in the game, and I don't think a single tank will come close to be the most played tank in the game. People love to deal high amount of damage instantly, and if you have a tank that can just sit in the back and deal over 1000 damage, no wonder it will be the most played tank in the game. But the 183 had an interesting story in this game. From being the worst tank in the game to being the most toxic tank in the game to what we have today, as still being the most toxic tank in the game, but also being the most overpowered tank in the game, or like one of the most overpowered tanks in the game. Whew. That's enough for me talking. I could have just done a different video and call it the story of the most toxic vehicle, but I wanted to edit some funny and ridiculous moments that I had. That's enough of me talking. Thank you guys a lot for listening to the story of the Deathstar, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye! But the we had 3 slots that we had to buy so we can make this. We had only 3 slots that we had to buy so we can make this. We only had 3 slots that we can. After some buffs, they also nerfed the on movement dispersion. They also nerfed. By buffing the aiming time as well, you can with that buff, the 183 has even